Hey, everybody, this is Jesse Krieger with Tom Marcus and Adam Hoagie, and we're here to do this book proposal breakdown on what makes a winning book proposal as we're coming into the Great American Writing Contest. Guys, how you doing? I'm excited to break down this book proposal for everybody.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's good to be here.
Good. I'm good. I'm excited.
Yeah, so as you guys registered and opted in to get the book proposal breakdown, you got a copy of a PDF that has the winning book proposal from last year's writing contest. So what we're actually going to do is walk through a winning book proposal. And in this case, the author won a $25,000 publishing package with us at Lifestyle Entrepreneurs Press. And you have an opportunity to win some amazing prizes, including a publishing deal and much more. So here's the pathway to doing that. It's creating a great book proposal. And whether or not you want to pursue a traditional publisher, or even if you're self-publishing your book, the value of creating a great book proposal can't be overstated. So before we break down this proposal, we're going to do a little tip from each of us on what's one of the most important considerations going into the whole writing and publishing process. What's one of the key things for an author, an aspiring author, to keep in mind? And then we'll dive in and break down each of these sections in the proposal. Tom, Adam, you guys want to jump in?
Yeah, I've got a few things on there, and but before I go on that, a book proposal is perfect for whether you're a self-published or a published author. Before you even put your first product, a book is a product, but before you ever put your first book out there. And many of the big reasons is because it's like a business plan to a book. I know authors hate hearing that word, what, business? There's nothing salesy about this process. This is how publishers have been doing it for over 100 years. This is the way that makes sense, that succeeds, that helps you to move forward, especially in your career. One thing that people often hear me say is that marketing begins before your pen hits the page. This is where it happens. Even if you're a self-published author, I highly recommend filling out your own book proposal before you start your book, because you're going to have to go over certain important elements, such as the market. What is the marketability of the book? Who are you targeting? You really need to understand who you're writing this book to before you write it. Whether it's fiction or nonfiction, it doesn't make a difference. You need to know where you can find them online or wherever it is you're going to be selling to them, exactly how to connect with them, what they like. And it's also going to really flex your copywriting muscle unbelievably. It'll help you to define your description for your book in the future. So when you go to publish your book, you'll have everything already laid out there for you in a perfect format. That's the number one thing that a lot of authors struggle with, is their description. And that's the number one selling point to a lot of people. When they're reading the book, before they even read it, they see the description. And so that's what I really love about book proposals, because in having them, it helps you to have an organized approach to publishing or to self-publishing.
Nice. There's a lot of gold right in there. And we haven't even looked at the proposal yet.
Yeah, I gotta just say, let's segue into it, because that's a great overview. There's nothing more I can touch on there until we actually just deep dive into these specific areas and how to write it. But that was perfect. Great work, Adam.
Adam, carrying the load for all of us. Thanks, man. So when we look at this proposal, it's broken down into these major sections. There's an overview that operates like an executive summary. And that's really where you are effectively selling the idea for the book at a high level and in context of like the market and other books and why somebody would be interested in reading this. From there, it's going to go into the author bio, so a description of the author, and in this case you, back cover copies. So like, what would you read if you pulled this book up on Amazon and you see the about the book description, that you get a chance to write that, perhaps even before you've written the book, but definitely in the context of the book proposal. And then we got the table of contents, marketing considerations, which is, we'll spend a good amount of time on that. And then finally, the first chapter, or some actual, an example piece of content of the book itself. So that, taken in total, is a book proposal. That can be up to a few dozen pages. You can do it in more or less, but it's something that, once complete, as Adam says, really gives both publishers and yourself clarity on what the book is about and who it's for. So when we look at this proposal here, you can see the very first, after the cover page, you've got the overview, and the very first line is, "Can I tell you a secret?" Question mark. And then it goes on to say the offline dating method isn't just about dating. The material goes well beyond simply attracting a romantic partner. And then it goes on and on. So right out of the gate, one of the things we noticed, and maybe we can riff on this too, is that the it hooks the reader right away and pulls you in, right? So this is a chance to really sell sort of the idea of the book more so than telling somebody every single thing that's in it and why the strategies work and this and that and the other thing. The very beginning, you want to get somebody interested in the idea of the book. Adam or Tom, if you want to jump in and talk about like high level overview, executive summary, like if somebody just wrote a one pager, what can they cover that's important for somebody to read right away?
I'm going to make a comment on this one with this introduction. The reason I like it, and again, this actually might be what I was commenting to you, Jesse, before we actually hit record, was that this one was way more engaging than a lot of other proposals that I've read, which seem a lot more sterile. And so I think that's an interesting approach. And it's not what I really like about it is that by reading it, I can understand how she's going to market it and sell it already. Like she's already, and that I can tell she's a good writer, if that makes sense. So it's like, to me, this is just like a great intro. It hooks me. I already get the idea of like who this is for. And she hasn't, she didn't start by like pitching me on something. She's just like effectively teaching. Like, it's really like, I think she took that approach, like what she submitted. It's almost like she's teaching you, Jesse, like, here's how it works. And it's like, that's actually useful. You're a publisher. Why should you know this space at all? And so just kind of introducing you to it was like really helpful for what it's worth. And I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah. I mean, to just accentuate one part of this, she's positioning this book, the title, The Offline Dating Method. It's just positioning against swiping left and right on Tinder and doing the whole online dating, which a lot of people are sort of burned out on. So she says right in the opening paragraph, 10 years ago, online dating was a fun and novel way to get a date. However, it's morphed into a dangerous dependency on technology to help with one of the most important decisions you'll ever make, meeting your future partner. Wow, I'm hooked. Like, there's an angle there in terms of a cultural trend that people become dependent on technology to make an important decision, and the offer of a solution that the offline dating method is the solution to break that dependency. So positioning, I think it's important to look at as well. Anything you want to jump in on there, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. The overview is very much the description of the book, and never tell somebody what your book is about, because everybody works on the description last because they want to finish the story. And to think about it, I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but I know it's happened to me, where when I finish a book, I get so excited. I have to go tell the first person, my mom or family member, whoever it is, first friend I see. And then they ask me, "Oh, that's great. What's it about?" And then I'm a deer in the headlights. And that's what the description ends up becoming. Well, it is about this. Well, instead of being the engaging, well thought out process it needs to be, and just kind of breaking it down and looking at this, there's two things that I want to mention here first. First is from the publisher's perspective. If you cannot sell the publisher on your book, they don't believe that you could sell the book to the reader. When you're writing one of these, you have to sell the publisher. You have to sell it to the person reading this. And when they feel sold on it, I mean, listen to Jesse. The first thing he says, I get 2 sentences in and I am sold. He's the publisher here. When you sell the publisher on it, you are going to make the transaction. Your book is going to get published, because if they can believe in what you are doing and what you are building, and they believe in this, they're going to put you out there. And the second thing I wanted to say on that is exactly what you guys were making the point of, is how this is structured and how you hook somebody in an overview or in a description. In this case of nonfiction, she is pointing out, she's first establishing herself as an authority on the subject. Can I tell you a secret? And a secret, first of all, that piques somebody's interest. Oh, what is it? Let me see. So that's a hook to catch your interest. And then as you begin to read, she's starting to break it down. Hey, these are the great things that people loved. But now here she is establishing the problem that has been created by what should have been a problem solver. And now as a result, over time, we see this big problem that's created that's causing us to have this specific issue, which is what the book is about. And now
Yeah.
let me tell you how I've found a way to overcome it. And that's how you sell a book, a course, whatever it is that's out there. That's the best way to really kind of build that momentum that you need in a description or an overview.
Well, go ahead, Tom.
I'm going to make just one comment too. What I really like is that it's just making the case for what the book is, the problem it's solving, and it's not coming in saying, "Here's why you should believe me." Like the author isn't trying to prove herself at this point in time. She hasn't started to. That's later on, and it's just one of those things to keep in mind. Like I think a lot of people lead with like their credentials on something like this, and it's like that's actually safe for later. Right now, just sell me on the premise this, like assuming like we know you can back it up and we know what you're talking about. Now what? So don't get caught up in like kind of promoting yourself early on. I think she did that right, and that would be hard to think about. And if we had an example of a bad proposal, you probably would notice something like that. But
Yeah.
that's all I'll say on that point.
Well, I want to just underscore one thing Adam said, which I think is really important, is the audience for the proposal is different than the reader of your book. And so writing to the audience of the proposal is publishers, perhaps literary agents, people that are going to open some door, provide some level of access or opportunity. So in another way of saying that with reference to the offline dating method is she's not writing to a single woman looking to meet a guy. She's writing to a potential publisher on why this book is important, timely, and the problem that it solves, right? So if you just take that away, that's probably one of the first takeaways with this overview is who you're writing for is different than who's ultimately going to be reading your book. To keep that in mind, and you'll blow us all away with your book proposals. So, then she goes on and completing the executive summary or overview section starts to paint the picture of why now is the time and why she's the right person to write this book and where she fits into the cultural conversation around dating. So the next mini section, The World is Waking Up, says, for the past 5 years, media has explored the effects of online dating apps on our culture, and then links to a number of articles and videos from journalists, so things like Vanity Fair and Psychology Today. Now she's really establishing why this is important now and who else is focusing on this topic. Goes on to cite a number more documentaries and studies. And let's just put it this way, that some people want to see statistics and numbers and references, and she's really speaking to that inclination here, whereas some people are more interested in the author's credibility and the size of their own personal platform. Maybe some other people are just interested in the topic and convinced that it can be the leading book in a category. When you speak to each of those inclinations, then you cover all the bases. Tom, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like what you're saying is like you're basically in this doing it well, doing it right. Like we're saying here is like defining the market, like proving that the market exists, and then proving that your solution can work for that market. And it's like, yeah, it's that one layer deeper, because you wouldn't, when you'd actually come time to promote this and market this to readers, they already understand that market exists. They are the market. So it's not like you wouldn't use that to sell them on it. That is specifically for the publisher. And so that they understand it's like, oh yeah, this market does exist. This makes sense. And it's helpful because then you should be conducting your own research anyway, and have a good pulse on it. Like, is there really a market here? Can I define it? Are there clear examples that can demonstrate this? Even just for your own, I think, edification of how you want to go about marketing and sharing your book, you should know that anyway. But I thought that was particularly like my big takeaway from this piece right here, what she did really well.
Well, yeah, and we'll get into more of that, I think, soon in the marketing discussion. But just think as well that by finding other publications, TV shows, radio, whoever else is talking about your topic in the course of research turns into your marketing channels. Well, if there's articles in Vanity Fair and Psychology Today, maybe you speak to their readership and try and get featured in that publication leading up to the book launch. So we'll preview. We'll get to more of that later.
Right.
Unless you want to jump in, I thought that one.
There's one little thing I wanted to riff on in there that both of you guys had said. And again, this is written to the publisher, and it's showing them two things. One, that there is a market, but two, you understand the market. They want to know that you understand it, because they might not, but you do. And so if you know your market, you've done the marketing beginning before the pen is hitting the page, You understand who you're going to, just like Jesse was saying, where you're getting it from. And this, we'll get into that more later, but the point is it's helping them see your knowledge of the market, and that there is a marketability for the book itself. And that's publishers want to see that. That's absolutely necessary. And rather than just saying, yeah, there's a market for it, here's a couple extra books, she went and did the extra effort of saying, here are specific examples of the mainstream media going in depth on it, which is extremely helpful.
Definitely agree. And provide some numbers, and in so doing sort of shows her fun, quirky personality. It says, by the numbers, 265 men have asked me out in person. Then in parentheses, I have a spreadsheet. So she's done the legwork, so to speak, and she's got some funny stories around that. Goes on down, and at the end of the stats, it says 0 dating apps or online dating platforms involved in the process. So again, coming back to the point of the book, offline dating method. Interesting little play with words. Notice as well that she is including testimonials and quotes from people throughout this executive summary. On the last page of the overview, it says, now is the time, this is the book, I am the person. And at the end of that section says a quote from a workshop student of hers. If you want to get into a really positive place about dating, this is for you. Camille is charming with great ideas, extensive content, and wonderful energy. So not just the author describing the book and who it's for, but showcasing other people the author has helped get success to make the case for her. And I think that's a really smart thing that Camille did throughout this presentation. So moving on to the next section, we've got the author bio. And I wouldn't say it's a hard and fast rule that you have to put the author bio right after an overview, but it's smart since this is the person who's writing the book proposal. Now that we're convinced that the book is a good idea and it meets the market, okay, who's the author? And even in the author bio, she's not just saying, here's my, CV, here's my resume. It's still selling the idea. The first sentence, with the dating industry oversaturated by online profile writers, quote unquote, and ineffective matchmakers, Camille Virginia offers single women a refreshingly simple yet powerful approach to ditching the apps and magnetically attracting Mr. Right in the real world. I mean, that's a great opener for a bio.
Yeah, I want her to write. I want her to write my bio. This is really.
Maybe we'll add a new prize if she's willing. She can do some author bio consultations.
Solid.
Yeah. So all that to say, even as you're describing yourself, it's not just a chronological history of what you've done. It's why have you achieved success, or why are you so passionate and the right person to write this book? And I think that covers, a lot of it here in terms of the author bio section. So I want to jump to the next part, which is the back cover copy. And this is the same as saying the book description that you'd read on Amazon or on a retail site. So here's where you really summarize the book and sell it in a few short sentences, really frequently not more than 7 to 10 sentences, or 3 to 500, 600 words. Can go longer than that, but this is where you really get down right to it, what the book's for, what the book is and who it's for. So notice as well, she's got a genre here. Again, having done her research, she's seeing that the family and relationship / love and romance genre and categories are where this book would be positioned when it was actually going to print and going into bookstores and distribution. So, we don't need to read through the back cover copy, but I think this is a good chance to have a discussion about, the importance of having a good book description and how that becomes one of the primary sales points for the book before it's written and after it's published.
It's interesting. I mean, I just commenting on that because just adding to what you're saying is it's spot on. Like the back cover copy is so hard when you think about it, like or at least I would think it's because you're trying to condense the whole purpose behind what you're doing, why you're doing it, why this is the book to read, like into such a tight space anyway. It's a good forcing function for you as you're writing. So even if you're planning to self-publish or not, but to think about this, because this actually, I think if you kind of start with this a little bit too, it's a good forcing function to maybe where you want to take the book. Just my thoughts on this, because this part is so challenging, but it also proves that, listen, you kind of are judged. The book is judged by the cover, or in this case, like the back description, like, and maybe a portion or a chapter or something like that, the book typically with these proposals, right? But it's like not much. You're getting graded on very few things here. And so take the time to just get this right. Like, this is critical.
Yeah, you touched on something that I'm always fond of saying, the world will judge your book by its cover. So, a lot of times we have that throwaway line of don't judge a book by its cover. Practically speaking, people do. At a really tactical level, that's because it's all that they have to go on before picking up the book, opening it, and reading any of the actual content. So the back cover description, or the about the book description, is just about on par with the book cover design itself in terms of importance. Now, when you're writing a book proposal, you may not have a book cover design. In fact, very few book proposals I've seen have a professionally designed cover. So this becomes the most important aspect, because when it's on retail or on a shelf, somebody's going to see the cover and then look over and see the description, or pick up the book and turn it around and say, okay, what's this about? So that's the context for what the book description is. And Adam, anything you want to jump in on here?
Yeah, I just, a phrase I like to say, an epic description creates epic sales, because it's one of the most important parts of your writing. It's the first thing anyone's ever going to read from you. So you need it to be the best. And it's not just well written, commas in the right place or whatnot, but just like Tom was saying, I'm paraphrasing it, but basically distilling down this huge concept of what your book is about, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. There's just so much behind the scenes that you've written, that you've gone through. How do you, if you're writing fiction, how do you put your story in this little package? It's kind of this model. It's hard to do. You feel like you're trying to squeeze a man inside one of those cubic foot boxes like you see at the circus or whatever. And it's a hard concept to try to really to follow. But ultimately, when you're able to get used to what I'm getting at here is, especially for self-publishers, whether you're published or self-published doesn't make a difference, but this is why I want self-publishers to be doing this too, because when you get used to distilling it down, and when you write the description before you write the book, think about it. You've already got the hardest part of the entire project done with. And the more time you spend really just angling that and writing it and hooking people with that part of your writing, the more sales you'll ultimately make. Because like you were saying, as far as it's the only thing people have to go off of, the front cover and the back cover. That's it. Then they open it up, start looking at it. If you can't sell them on those 2 points, they're never going to open the book. And that's why it's the most important facet, and why we're going to see it, and why publishers want to see this, particularly in your paper here.
Yeah, I think maybe that's really helpful and good perspective, on both fronts, just to give people watching and listening to this an idea of how you can model good book description copy. Let's look at a few sentences from this, which of course you should be following along with the book proposal and the PDF that you've received. So for the offline dating method, if you were to flip over the book, you'd see 9 simple steps to attracting the right man, ... without going online. Bold, centered. So again, it's a headline, it's an eye-grabbing technique. And then it goes on. So you could think about, what would be your one big bolded sentence that would get somebody interested in learning more about your book. Lead with that. And then it positions the problem from sexual harassment and body image shaming to lies about age, looks, and relationship status. Dating in the digital world can make a single woman's search for love feel anything but enjoyable and completely traumatizing. But then move to the solution right away. Enter the antidote to online dating burnout and dating app fatigue, the offline dating method. So those lead few sentences accomplish a lot, right? It's like Adam was saying, it's trying to fit so much into such a little space. It's just sort of like, how narrowly in can you zoom without losing the message? And then you've condensed down the main idea in the book and hooked somebody onto it.
From a writing standpoint, why I think this is kind of fun too, or like, and I've always been fascinated by like the craft of writing. I'm not really a great writer, but I'm fascinated when I see good writers. And so right here, what she's doing here, you'll notice it's like if you're struggling, like she's not like pointlessly fluffy or something like that. Like this is just all really compelling stuff. And so it's like, what makes a good sentence or two? And so just zooming in on it. What's interesting is that she just sets up the pain, the real deep pain, the pain that exists right now. And then in this case, what the solution is, like the cure. And she does that in basically 2 sentences. And you'll notice that like, it's like, is her cure really getting rid of sexual harassment and body image shaming or lies about age, looks, and like, will it do any of that? I don't know. But it's still good setting up the stage that's the pain point. Like what I'm getting at is your book doesn't have to solve all the problems that it's seeing. But still just describing those, it makes it a more compelling, a bigger thing than maybe it would be if she didn't highlight it that way. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Totally agree. And it's, she's speaking to people that have had these different experiences so that right away they're like, oh, that's me. Body image shaming. Oh, yep. I'm a little embarrassed about my bikini body. Lies about age. Oh yeah, that one guy that, said he was 32, but he was actually 50 when he showed up for online dating, right? So stuff like that. So those little pings speak to somebody if they've had that experience, but it's not saying I'm going to solve all these problems. It says enter the antidote to online dating burnout and dating app fatigue, and then serves it up that way. So yeah, great point.
Yep. Very well done.
Yeah, bravo. I mean, that's why she's the winner, right? So again, we're looking at this and you're looking at this and thinking, oh my gosh, it's such a great book proposal. Well, yeah, that's true. It's also the winning book proposal. So, there's a lot to gain by spending the time to do this right. And don't compare yourself to somebody else. Just take what we're talking about here in terms of the principles and write it in your own words about your own story, fiction or nonfiction. Let's move on because I want to spend some time on the marketing section. So, the next part here is showing the table of contents. And that's the first time where you're really like, okay, what's actually in this book? I get what it's about, who it's for, why it's important, and why she's the right person to write it. But here's actually the table of contents talking you through what become those 9 steps to master connection and meet the right guy, right? So that's where you actually see, okay, here's what the book itself is about. Beyond that, we get into the comparative analysis section. And this is really important, everybody, because from a publisher's perspective and from your perspective as the author, it's so important to know what other books, especially well-selling books, are out there, who wrote them, and where does yours fit amongst them. So you can see she's got 3 listed here. One is Get the Guy, Learn the Secrets of the Male Mind to Find the Love You Deserve. Another one is Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari. So that's more of like a popular, well-known book, but still using it as a reference. And then Captivate, The Science of Succeeding with People. Right, so she's saying that the offline dating method would fit for readers of or people interested in these books. And maybe, Tom, would you speak to, because I know you've done a lot of work with larger and traditional publishers, how are they thinking about comparative analysis and other titles in this context?
Yeah. So my work on these kind of proposals is pretty limited, but I've usually come in and worked with authors who are working with a traditional publisher and usually on the marketing side of things. And it usually begins with market research to a degree. Like a lot of times that stuff will already be established, but getting an inside look at it and seeing what the publisher really cares about. My experience is that like getting really clear on this is really useful for them. Again, it's like you're doing the homework for them, because if they like love everything about your book, but it's like, hey, now we got to go find out, have other books in this space sold yet or not? How many New York Times bestsellers have there been in this for this, something like this? And how original is this? Is this cutting edge, or is there something like a model that's already there? So again, you're proving the point that this thing has market potential by which seems counterintuitive, by highlighting the competitors, your comparables, and so that's the thing. It's because they're not competitors in this space. Every one of these books, the same person who reads one of these books would most likely also read her book. That's like the nature of books in many cases. Like these things aren't competitive. It's not like 1 for 1. It's not a zero-sum game. You can win, by ensuring that like readers of another book read your book, and people who read your book read somebody else's book. Like you all win that way. And so this is helpful for the publisher for many different reasons. For you to think about it too, and now we'll talk about this in a bit, in terms of starting to think about how do you reach your target readership. This is like critical piece number one. So
yeah, this actually gets into marketing in my mind as well, because this is the market. And I love what you said, Tom. This section isn't called competitive analysis, it's comparative, because how many people just buy one book and that's the only book they ever buy and they're never going to buy another book again? No, if people buy one book on a topic, they may end up buying multiple books. So it is important to fit in amongst the other titles. As it gets into the marketing consideration, you can use this in your marketing language. For example, readers of modern romance or fans of Aziz Ansari will love the offline dating method because, or something like that, where you're literally positioning your book against the title or author of other well-known books. So yeah, you want to jump in on that, Adam?
Yeah. I'm seeing, I wanted to bring a full circle here, something real quick. So the concept of what we're building here with the proposal is, first of all, you're having this introduction to the book. Next, as we're getting into some of the marketing elements, the first thing that she's doing, she's showing, look, there is a market and I understand it. And then further, she's showing, and now here's the piece of the market that I'm actually involved in and that I get. And there's a lot of attention to it here because there are other books that have succeeded. But then just exactly as Tom was saying, you don't want to have a book that's directly competing against a New York Times bestseller. I mean, if it's directly competing against something that's already out there, it's not necessarily going to do well. But no matter what you make online, whether it's a book or, I mean, anywhere in any business, whether it's a book or something else, it makes more sense to be able to come alongside of a brand, to come alongside other people. And so when you're naturally positioning your book to be alongside something that, and first thing that's coming to mind with fiction writers, this is easy because a story is a story. You can tell your own story, your own way. People who love this romance book will love yours because, well, yours is contemporary and this and that, but it's
probably
always
easier in some ways for fiction just to call it out.
Exactly. But for nonfiction, it helps you to identify yourself and your own brand as well. What exactly are you offering? What are you marketing? And in understanding that, if you choose to make other products on the back end, now you have a very focused vision for yourself. Even if it's just for the book, you have a very focused vision for it. Here's the broad market. Now let's niche it down and talk about who exactly has succeeded off of this. And now we can emulate that while carving out our own little section in this genre and this niche that makes sense for readers to be a part of.
Yeah, and notice as well that what she does here is actually not just list the other titles, but describe where her book fits in relative to it. So like with Get the Guy, she's got, it's a great book for single women who are struggling to navigate the modern dating process, but then skips forward and says, unfortunately, there are 4 important elements that are lacking in Get the Guy. So now she's actually speaking to what's missing or what she thinks is missing from that book and how her book answers that and provides, useful information that isn't there. So if you like that book, that's great. I'm glad it was helpful. And you're going to learn these additional things when you read mine. That type of an approach. Big bonus points if you take the time to do that. This should be one of the easier parts of the book proposal because you just get to do a survey and look around and recall some of the books that have influenced you. Those actually now become your peers. So a nice little preview of what it means to become an author. If you do get published, now you have a book that's alongside these other well-known books. And that's very much, if you do your marketing right, how it appears where you look on Amazon or something and says, readers of this book also bought. Imagine seeing yours right next to fill in the blank, and that's your comparative analysis, the beginning of it.
Exactly. And publishers, they want to see that there's a market for it. There's other books that have sold on it, but how yours is specifically unique and can stand out from the competition. And just that natural point of view, if you end up going and meeting one of these other authors, you shake their hand and create a cross promotion with them. They and you can be completely comfortable in sharing one another's material because nobody is stepping on each other's toes. You're adding on to one another's conversation in a remarkable way that helps to grow a bigger picture that makes sense for any readership.
Definitely, definitely. So hope this is helpful so far, everybody. We're going in depth on this winning book proposal and how you can write an amazing book proposal and win a bunch of awesome prizes in the Great American Writing Contest. So let's jump into the marketing section, because this is, I think, where the rubber meets the road in terms of looking at the real potential of your book and probably taking a look in the mirror at where you're actually at now in terms of your audience size, reach, and influence. So, when we get into the marketing snapshot here, we've got the URL for the book and or the author or the website that they're using, number of Facebook friends. If you've got a Facebook page, what is it? How many people follow it? Twitter, Pinterest, number of pins. In this case, she shows the actual monthly Pinterest viewers, LinkedIn connections, and so on and so forth, is saying, okay, where do you actually have a presence or people that are interested in what you're doing presently? And this is a good point to say, if there's a lot of zeros, if you got a bunch of goose eggs there, then that becomes your to-do list of, okay, time to establish more of an audience and a readership in advance of the book actually coming out. So book proposal is interesting because you're thinking about and planning something that's going to take place usually many months from now in terms of the book coming out. It also reveals to you what you should do and focus on in parallel to writing the book. So let's open it up and talk about important marketing considerations for authors and what to focus on in terms of a book proposal.
So I'm going to highlight a couple things on this one just to get started, and we can I'm sure we can all riff on all the pieces of this as we go. What I think is interesting about this is that she highlighted some of these where I might have just maybe not even shared the number necessarily. Like Twitter follows 173. Like, I don't know, does it even make sense to mention that you have Twitter? I'm not sure. So in that regard, you could probably, it's not like you have to have number of Twitter followers up there, guys. You can highlight whatever you want to highlight. Now, maybe there's a specific now, if there's a specific format that you have to fill in, then I guess you're left with what you get with. But otherwise, you can I think highlight where you're strongest. She shared everything, which I think is also great. Also just being really transparent across the board. What stood out to me though of why even these numbers that seem kind of low, they wouldn't offend me in this regard, because actually the email database size. So I know she gets that component of it, and that's always a good thing. Anybody who understands email or email marketing, I feel like, I don't know, if I'm a publisher, excuse me, that's what I care about. That's the thing that means a lot to me. But so those are just my 2 cents to get us started.
Yeah, absolutely. I know with publishers I've worked with, they are a lot about the racket and noise style of marketing, where it's be everywhere effect, which isn't necessarily the most effective. As Tom was saying, you want to focus on things such as email. So, today we'll definitely talk about what's going to be most effective for your marketing campaign, because that's what we want to see, is this becoming an out of the water, amazing success for you. But I think her mentality of why she chose to add that is to say, when you add all the numbers together, it is a much larger pot to be able to pick from. But ultimately, when you stop and you look at what's going to create the results, those who understand marketing are going to look and see, well, the email database size is significant enough to produce results. And ultimately, that and maybe her higher number should have been her highlight. I don't see why. I need to see that she had 10 paid monthly members. It doesn't really do much for me from my perspective. But even just a lot of these numbers, I already understand what Twitter or Facebook is going to get for her. So the way I see it is very similar to Tom's, that from my perspective, if I'm looking at publishing someone else's book, I want to know that they understand how to sell it, not just how they're going to try to sell it, but how to sell it. But at the same time, other publishers, what they might be looking at, especially a literary agent before they take this, they might not understand the exact process. So although you don't need to mention these different names, and as Jesse was saying, if you got goose eggs there, well, then leave them out. We don't need to put a Facebook 0 followers. But he is right, absolutely right. We need to start working on those points where you have that weakness, in the structure of the building. If you want to be able to keep towering these projects, sales, etc., and your book's up higher, you need to focus on the weaknesses that's going to keep you from adding on those bricks into the wall. And so I find that more of the methods that you should be focusing on are the ones that are going to pertain to your actual launch. How is the book launch going to look? And how is everything, that's the kind of feel when I'm looking at this. What are you going to do to create enough racket and noise for this book to actually start making sales?
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And in my opinion as well, like she erred on the side of providing a ton of information. I wouldn't expect everybody to include every blog post or every guest article or every appearance that you've ever done if it's super extensive. It shows well, but when speaking to Adam's point, focusing on what you're going to do to actually launch and promote this book, there's a whole section in here where she says, I've been purposely flying under the radar with major media, choosing instead to hone my message and build my media presence in smaller to medium-sized presentations, right? So shows that she's been working at it to get that snowball effect where you actually get on larger media. It's realistic. If I were to look at this and she says, I'm going to be featured on all the top podcasts and this and that, but there is no foundation there of being on other shows and being, a guest and a contributor, it's less believable to just say, oh yeah, well, she searched for top 50, dating podcasts and just listed them all there. That's the marketing plan. Okay. But are you really going to get on them and do? So showing that, I think was smart on her end. And then, in the relationships and affiliations, showing who she's specifically been building relationships with and giving herself a little like social proof here with a picture with Ramit Sethi and Jay Abraham, right? So showing that she already has relationships with influential people and, saying that she's going to call in some favors and focus on getting launch support from the relationships that she has. So those are a few other things I noticed. Those are things that you can focus on, talking about what you're going to do, even though it hasn't happened yet, the level of specifics that you can provide, like I'm going to work with these influencers and here's the relationship building strategy and here's my outcome of what I want to get from them. Sure, that's good. It shows that you're actually thinking about these things at a granular level. Tom, you want to jump in on anything else on the marketing and launch strategy side?
Yeah. So, excuse me, kudos to her for having actually kept a list of like everything where she's ever been featured on anything ever. It's pretty wild. I was like, I should do that.
She also has that spreadsheet of every time she's been asked out in person. So
yeah,
definitely a list making gal.
Yeah. Attention to detail. I appreciate that. So I like that because I'm like, even if she doesn't, because you guys are, I agree with you. It's like, I'd be more keen to see this section talk about what are the plans to launch it, not just here are all the things I've been on. Because I'm left looking at this and I think to myself, oh, what we should do is leverage all these people's platforms and email them and et cetera. But then I might have, if I were her kind of writing this, I would have maybe written it that way. Like, so I'll be reaching out to these 30 or these 51 podcasts that I've already been featured on that I'm friends with, and these 12 people who I'm in a mastermind with and have these audiences reaching this many people. I've got this, 37, that's the kind of stuff I've gone into depth with. And again, I don't know if everybody needs, I know they care about it. Traditional publishers care about it. And if you can get really precise with numbers, like they prefer if it's like your own platform, like, oh, we have an email database of like 200,000, blah, 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 and all that. But if I can also say I've lined these things up or we have these kind of strategic partnerships that are on the table with some degree of certainty, then they find that very valuable. But you want to quantify that for them. They're not. It's tough to extract out what that means. All these things you've been on, what does that mean that you've been on these podcasts? I don't know. But if it means you have a pretty good relationship and you think they'll email once for you and the cumulative list size there is like 3 million and blah, 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 blah. Now we've got something. Now we're rolling. And that's kind of what that was what I took from this, was that was her intention all along. And so, but I don't know if that's the case. I would just lay it out for the publisher so they see what you're doing.
No, that's great advice. And echoing, the value of having list sizes and promotional commitments, that when you get down to it is where the rubber's really meeting the road. Like, emails are going out to these many people within the launch window, then it's realistic to start to think, okay, what could that really mean in terms of sales? Which is, a big part of what the publisher's thinking about and helping position the book to do. Just to relate, I just came back from a sales conference presenting our fall 2019 releases to the sales team of our distribution partner. And that's what the conversation centers around. Book cover, title, subtitle, maybe 1 or 2 sentences of what the book is about, and then comparable titles. So like really preferentially published within the last 3 years. So not a book from 1998, because that's not necessarily relevant as a comparable for the book that's coming out a year from now. So comparable titles, and then marketing plan and key selling points. So marketing plan, what we're talking about here is, specific shows, specific outlets, the approximate total reach, and that's what helps paint the picture. So, if this sounds all new to you, or if this makes you think like, don't they care about the content? You just have to keep in mind that at the higher level of abstraction, where someone's working with dozens or hundreds or thousands of books, you have to condense it down to what are the other titles where booksellers and book buyers, purchase these books, then they'd also want yours. That's the positioning. And then the reach is, how many people are you going to reach, or do you believe you can realistically reach through the launch?
And I was just going to comment and say, yeah, it's like, listen, what we're looking at is an example of a proposal that won. So it won, and we're even critiquing this portion of it because it was, in the scheme of everything else that was laid out, it was less important, because I'm guessing when you saw this, like, oh, she gets it. She understood it. She knew what was going on. And that was like enough. And then seeing it, it was like, okay, you could put the piece of the puzzle together. So it's, what we're suggesting is like, yeah, if you can paint the picture and lay it out for the publisher, like, why not? It helps sell you better. But also, if you can't, doing something at least like this, where you do just lay out, everything you possibly can think of, I think this is better than if she just reduced this without much messaging. Somehow for me, I don't know, this is a weird thing. So maybe it's just like quantity of text matters or something. I don't know. Maybe it's just tricky, but actually just seeing all these things listed out, I'm like, okay, cool. Like, even though she didn't explain at all what she's really going to be doing with any of these outlets, I was like, I still felt better about it. So like, there's that. So know that you don't have to be perfect on this stuff. You don't have to have like a whole scoped out like marketing plan or campaign, but what you do want to try to do is quantify the reach as much as you can. So I just wanted to leave it at that.
Yeah, super solid.
I definitely wanted to kind of tie that all together. There's something that I'm definitely seeing that could be super helpful here. And what it is that going all the way back to the original, we were finding the market, then we're narrowing down and finding our section and how it compares with other books. And this right here is why it's important. If you haven't done it yet as an author, you have not created and facilitated relationships with other authors and other people, influencers online. Even if you write fiction, there's other bloggers and influencers directly in your niche that are related to it that have people reading their blogs who would love to read your books. So all across the spectrum, you should be making relationships and building these connections with various people so that you can have a platform with which to truly launch your book with. And so, like I was saying, like how we're going to go over the things that really create the results is this here. And one thing that I guess maybe that I think we're all trying to get at, though, is although she did well, one little piece that I always see could be done better in proposals is when they lay it all out, to simply mention, how are you going to leverage? This was your past, which is great. That's awesome. How are you going to leverage that to be your present or future? And so in Tom's case, his $500,000 blueprint for launches, it's all based upon a very simple concept, which I like to call leveraging other people's audiences. So in the case when he's helped other people, they in this particular case, which I believe it was with John Lee Dumas, I think it was with his book, it was leveraging other people's audiences. John had gone out and built those relationships, and Tom was able to take that information and pull it all together and put it into an amazing launch. And the reason is that you want to have something like this is because it's infinitely easier to find, let's say, 10 people who have 25,000 subscribers each, than it is, even if it's in the next 30 days. You look at your watch, in 30 days, go and shake some hands with people. You can easily find 10 people to work with you with 25,000 subscribers each in your niche or your genre. It's infinitely easier to do that than to go out and try to find 250,000 individuals in the next 30 days and get them on your list. So following that same principle, when you create a bigger circle of influence through your partnerships, your friendships, and other people that you're willing to work with, they're willing to work with you too. You put that all together, that's your marketing plan. Lay it out.
I want to just say this too. What's funny about this, like as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, if I'm new to this space, like would I understand what we're talking about? Like if I weren't a writer, if I had never done this before, does it make sense to me? And also just looking at it historically, what I think is fascinating is like, think about it. The publishing industry has changed so much in the last 20 years, 30 years, like significantly, right? Like wildly. And so parts of this, even though they're all a structure that's been consistent for a long time, I don't know how long this has been in place, but decades. But now some of these things have had to change. It was like this kind of stuff mattered a lot less probably like 20 years ago, or it was like it only really mattered if you were like had a TV show or something or some massive platform. But now what you see is the integration of, okay, what is your social media following, email lists, etc. That's like that's kind of what you see most publishers ask for, honestly, is that they're not that in depth. So that's what I'm saying is what I'm talking about here, what we're describing is you have to kind of paint the picture for them, because I'll tell you what we're discussing is the kind of thing that will soon be measured if these companies aren't already doing it. If they don't already value this as like one of the highest level activities you could do, this is it. This is where everything's going, is referrals, and strong referrals from kind of third parties, and leveraging all these different independent audiences that are out there and hungry for the type of content. It's like, listen, the big media stuff is breaking down. We're seeing it happen. So now one of the evolutions of that, the growth of this, is not only these independent platforms, but the fact of how much power they wield. And the person who has the most power, we'll say, or the most potential future success is their relationships and how many connections they have to these different audiences. Because then they could reach infinitely more people than, that only used to be possible if you'd gotten on like primetime TV or, Oprah or something like that. It's like you can recreate the audience reach of Oprah with partnerships, and we've done it. Like it's wild when you think about it. Anyway, I just wanted to riff on that.
No,
I love it.
It's gold. And it's true. Do you have something you wanted to add, Adam?
It reminds me of how so many authors want to get in with BookBub. And I just like, become your own BookBub. Create your own circle of influence. Create your own Oprah show, so to speak. I mean, it's so easy to do. You just go out and meet some people that makes sense for you. It's not hard. It's doable. Anyone could scale like that now.
Yeah.
And it's measured, and it matters more now than it did before. So it's like, even if you're new to this, it's like, it's okay. So now's a good time to get started. Again, don't feel the last thing I want is anybody to hear this and be like disconcerted by any of it. That's not the point. Again, this was not laid out in this winning proposal, but it's like, if you want to get ahead of the ball curve, like if you want to position yourself well enough, whether you're going to be traditionally published or you want to just have the best plan in place for your self-published book, you want to have a list of people that you're going to plan to ask to help or support or assist or share. So what are you doing right now to cultivate those relationships? That's fundamentally what it is. So it's just like, I know this is kind of sidetracked then into that, but it's like, just, I guess keep that in mind as you're writing this. If you don't have them already established, just write down the list of people that you're building rapport with or something like that. And maybe that is actually just like your prime mover then, and the next direction you move, and you start to really focus on this, because it's just so much faster, as Adam said, than trying to build your own list, or grow your own email list, or build a massive following on social media overnight or ever. This stuff is actually accessible.
Yep. It's good. And it starts to bring us to a close in terms of dissecting this. When we get to this marketing plan, It's where we have the most to say because it becomes the most important consideration on the basis that you've got a good book and that you're the right author to write it, right? So then it really does become about this marketing conversation. And that's why you can see a lot of the, if not most of the book proposal speaks in that way, speaks in that language. So with all that in mind, and you've got this to evaluate, on your own and reference, the final section is actually a first chapter, or an introduction in this case, to the book. Chapter 1. So an actual taste of the writing style itself. So we're not going to do something super in depth on this section other than to say everything else leads up to, okay, here's a chapter of the book. From a publisher's point of view, from my point of view, it isn't that important because I know, as with any book, we're going to put it through editorial. There's going to be rewrites and revisions. So in other words, I'm confident that as long as it's decent, that it can be improved and made great by the time it's going to print. So it's actually not, and maybe this is a mindset shift for you, it's not that important that you have great writing for your book in your proposal, as much as it is important to understand everything else we've been looking at and talking about, because with the right team or editor or developmental writer, there's so many ways to turn the knowledge and experience you have or the story you have into the actual prose and content that's within the book. So that's another way of saying, don't stress too much about trying to blow everybody away with the actual writing in your book proposal. If you nail all those other things, people will be very eager to help you create the best book possible so that you can affect that whole marketing plan with every other consideration. So with that, let's start to bring this book proposal breakdown to a close. And hopefully this has been helpful and valuable and given you a lot of ideas, a lot of perspective on how to write your book proposals. And with that, get your entries in for the Great American Writing Contest. You can win a full done-for-you publishing package, launch support, one-on-one author coaching, a bunch of other amazing prizes we've got. The only thing standing in between you and them is writing a good book proposal, and we've been breaking down here for almost an hour exactly how to do just that. So any final thoughts, Tom and Adam, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I feel like that was a really good flow. And if a person goes back and looks at just those simple topical points, when you listen to something like this for an hour, it can sound complex because you're getting lost in the details of the things that are interesting you. But you go back and look at just the specific details. What is it? What's the overview like? You're trying to sell it to the publisher, not the reader yet. Remember who you're writing this to. So, and it's not writing about what your book is about. You're selling them on the book. That's what's most important. And then what kind of market exists for this? Can you write down the numbers? Can you show the people who have been involved? Entrepreneur Magazine, whoever it is, the big names. What media has been involved? In her case, there's even TV shows made about this, and Catfish or whatever it's called. There's all kinds of big time attention given to it, to your idea. You know what it is. You write it down, make it specific so the publisher can understand it clearly. If you'll notice, there's bullet points. It's simple. It's easy to read. It's not a bunch of paragraphs that someone has to look through. They can skim with their eyes when they're first looking at it and just be like, oh, yep. It's clean. It's simple. And then she breaks it down, as we were saying, into what other kinds of books have sold well, that have done well. And then she breaks it down, and here's my specific take, my specific spin on everything so that I can fit well within it without directly competing. And then we come down further to the last few points of table of contents, her own bio, what makes her the person to be able to write this, and ultimately, what's the marketing? So for self-publishing, why this is important is because you're creating an outline and a structure for yourself that will help you to understand what your book will and should look like. This is where the marketing is beginning before your pen hits the page. This is exactly everything you need to design practically in a way. And you'll begin seeing your own weaknesses in your own marketing strategies. You'll see the holes in the whole system. if you do this with your next book, you'll find that you got holes. And ultimately, those holes that you have in your strategy, you can put it back together and sew it all back up and fix your strategies so that next book moving forward, or even with this book, you can crush it and have the best launch that you've ever had in your life.
I love it. Couldn't have said it better myself. And we're going to wrap this up. So we'll see you throughout all the rest of the Great American Writing Contest. Thanks for joining us on this book proposal breakdown with Tom Marcus, Adam Hoagie, and I'm Jesse Krieger. Talk to you soon.